And I'm on the steering committee for Theater Lovers Club. I think you guys all know what Theater Lovers Club does, so my commercial doesn't have to be very long.
But I wrote it, Jan, it's beautiful.
Come on, you gotta give it the full.
I will say, if you aren't a member, you can join Theater Lovers Club, no cost, no bother. Just go on the website for Theater Santa Fe and join, and you get all these emails with all these wonderful offers. So, yay. It's a lot of fun.
That's the
We
truth.
really want you to love theater so bad you can't live without it. That's really our mission. I'm talking to the choir. Okay, so on to tonight's feature, Intimacy on Stage with the amazing and talented Zoe Burke. I know all of you have seen her work, whether you know it or not, in this, because you will have. I'll just let you know what she's been working on. Kinky Boots, Spring Awakening, Legally Blonde, those sound familiar with Triumph, okay, Sunday in the Park with George, The Baby Monitor, on Clover Road with Playhouse, Pericles, The Winter's Tale, Romeo and Juliet, Taming of the Shrew with Incite Shakespeare. Those are just the theater credits. There are film credits, which include Bottom Out and Night of the Starlings. So Zoe has trained incredibly extensively for this job she now has of working with so many people. I'm just going to mention Stage Combat Dallas and Theatrical Intimacy Education and many others. So this is not a walk-on job. I just want you to know that. So I am delighted to introduce, to those of you who may not know her, Zoe Burke. And she's going to run
my other job, so I wear all of the hats as I'm a teacher, so I have handouts. So I'm going to give you handouts. These are, if you have acted in a show that I've worked on, if you've directed and produced a show that I've worked on, you have seen one of these because they are very much kind of standard issue for people who do this work in the theater. So I'm going to, I've got one for myself, great. So I'm going to pass these around, or have you pass them around rather, and then kind of get started. So, yay, I am Zoe Burke. I am an intimacy professional. I've been doing this work for about 5 years now, which is a really fun milestone, very exciting. As Jen said, I primarily live in the theater world. I do film when they ask me to because it's very fun, but theater is definitely my home in this regard. And it's something that I really love doing and really passionate about and really believe that it makes a huge difference both in sustainability of the experience for the actors and the quality of the product. And speaking of actors, I am joined by two absolutely incredible people from Stage Day. You have seen their work. They are amazing. They are brilliant. They are wonderful. We all get into all sorts of ISC shenanigans together. So we have Jeffrey Pomeroy and Jane Blackenderley. So give them a great Cool. So as you can see on this, I kind of get into what on earth this work is, because even though it is becoming more of an established field, and I feel very, very fortunate to do this work in Santa Fe where so many theaters are so invested in actor safety, people don't always know. People are kind of like, well, why are you here? Or the always common, oh, well, can I give you a hug? Are you the sex police? I've heard that so many times, but why I do what I do, why Christine, also not to put you on the spot, but hey, Christine is an incredible intimacy professional as well in the film world, also directing Mary Goodman and Charlie Brown at the Playhouse. We love her, we're so happy she's here. But this work that we do came out of largely the Me Too movement and just the recognition of the power imbalances in theater, film, opera, dance, a lot of movement-centric performing work. We know that historically there have been a lot of really damaging things done to disadvantaged, marginalized, queer, femme, minority, person of color, young performers. And so really taking action to create safer spaces, to give performers agency. And the second piece of that also, this work was kind of pioneered by a lot of people who were in the combat field. So it's a movement practice. It's making sure that this is safe, sustainable, consensual, dynamic storytelling that can last an entire run. So, I'm going to show you a little bit of what we do. I do want to uplift, I cited most of my sources. We're going to kind of be loosely guided by the pillars or the 5 C's of intimacy. That's from a company that no longer exists called Intimacy Directors International. And so these are kind of the things that frame how I look at a project, what questions I ask, what I bring in, what I ask people to do. So, one of the things that we are specifically looking at ISC type intimacy, which is a very, very different context because we do quick raises. What is a quick raise? It is a week of 10 out of 12s and then a show on Friday. So it is very different than a traditional, month to 6 week, whatever rehearsal process of 3 hours per night. So that's something that definitely influences the way we work because we don't have specific staging. Very often when you work in a traditional process, you have the blocking. You have, okay, and now on this line, the character sits down. No. The balcony in Romeo and Juliet was sometimes a balcony, but almost never. It was just based on actor instinct. So finding the moments that do need that choreography as context is very important for us. We're going to talk a lot about consent because that is a huge, huge, huge tenet of this work. I used to be a teaching artist for a company called Intimacy Directors and Coordinators. I have borrowed lovingly their CRISP acronym, which is a riff on the FRIES acronym that Planned Parenthood uses for what consent is. So in intimacy work, it can be, should be, considered, giving actors time to think about it. Revocable, they can always change their minds. Informed, they know what they are consenting to. Specific, consent to one action in one scene is not blanket consent for everything, for every project, forever. And participatory, meaning, I'm gonna make them do some work too. I'm not just gonna be like, here's your stage and go. Communication, we wanna make sure that we're really centering healthy communication that also extends to communication with an audience. So what do content warnings look like? Do we need them? Yes. How do we frame them so that way people who don't want spoilers don't get them? Things like that. How are we dealing with conflict within theater companies? Something that I often do is help develop conflict resolution pathways as well for people who are making theater. So that way I'm not the Band-Aid for all of the interpersonal conflict, of which there is often a lot in the theater. And then choreography, of course. Physical storytelling, how we establish that. Is that something that is very specific or something that goes into more of what we call container work, which we'll get more into later. And then we're going to do some closure practice work as well, which is just how do you leave the character in the space at the end of the day. So, you have to work now. One of the first things that we do, welcome, in intimacy work is start talking about boundaries. We often say your boundaries are perfect exactly where they are, and that is true. This is also one of those kind of things that is in response to lack of actor agency previously, because very, very often, I'm youngish, I'm 34, but in my beginning, Amy, in my beginning theater career, there was a lot of, okay, and now this contact is happening whether you're okay with it or not. And very often I wasn't. That's an experience y'all probably had as well. So being able to be really intentional and say, you know what, here are your boundaries, this kind of contact is okay, this is not, and that's allowed to change, is really, really important in making actors feel safe and heard from the very get-go. So there are about 1 million ways to do boundary checks. This also can, and Christine, you could talk about this way more, but in film, we also talk about like writers and things like that, right around nudity as well. We don't have as much of that, certainly in IFC theater. But one of the standard practices for boundary checks is a partnered exercise that comes from Theatrical Intimacy Education. So if I can get my lovely actors to stand, please. And we use terminology of gates and fences because our boundaries change depending on context, right? Going back to context. So for me, this is a boundary. Even Jeff, who is a lovely human who I know very well, if he just walked up and put his hand on my throat, I would not be comfortable with that. If it were a sequence of stage combat that had been choreographed, sure, why not? So that would be what we call a gate. That opens sometimes for me. That's not always, always, always a boundary. So I'm going to cross over here for better sight lines for y'all over there. And if you would like to please face each other. Awesome. So for the boundary exercise, we need a partner A and a partner B.
Want to be A or B?
I'll be B.
Okay, I'll be A.
Awesome. Love that. So partner A is going to use their hands to show points where they are comfortable with physical contact, drawing a line where they are not, and if there's a gate, they can even mime a gate. Sometimes we find that helpful. And partner B's job is just to watch.
Just came from dinner, I got a gate there.
Cool. So that's phase one. They did a beautiful job. They're perfect. All right, so phase two is optional. It is recommended. I like it with actors who haven't done a lot of intimacy work before because it's a really good check-in for both partners on, okay, these are your boundaries. Am I comfortable making contact there? Or, oh, I thought I was okay with this, but actually, no, I don't want you to touch there. So this is optional. I will leave it up to you if you would like to do it. But step two of this would be partner A taking partner B's hand and guiding it over those places again. Okay, so go for it. Cool. And so part three would be partner B saying in desexualized and non-gendered language where Jeff's boundaries were, so where he did not want contact. We want to make sure the language is desexualized because we want to make sure we create the safest and most neutral environment possible. Even trying to use slang can sometimes inadvertently make people uncomfortable. And desexualized because we can never assume somebody's relationship to their own body, right? So in theatrical intimacy, we do tend to use language like upper torso, front of pelvis, back of pelvis. In situations where it's more granular or film, it's very much more common to go more anatomically correct. But for the purposes of here, because this is not a scene where we're going to need to get into that much detail, go ahead and just press your language.
So boundaries, neck is a gate, and front of stomach is a gate, and front of pelvis, back of pelvis are fences.
Correct.
Yay, amazing. And so they would then switch, but in the interest of time and you seeing some staging, we're going to go ahead. If you want to just verbally share any boundaries you have today.
Gate, yeah, also dinner. Fence. Yeah.
So
Did I do that clearly enough? Sorry, I didn't. I was too rapid.
chest and stomach are gates, front of pelvis, back of pelvis, fences.
Excellent, good, good, good. So this is something that we recommend actors doing as frequently as they need. Some people recommend every rehearsal. I tend to leave it up to the actors and step in and advocate for them as I need to if I'm starting to see issues come up around people not remembering, because we want to assume the best, not remembering boundaries. Cool, so we're gonna move into one of my absolutely favorite things. Most of you have seen this before, I think, but I love, love, love this chemistry exercise that comes from Theatrical Intimacy Education. I really like it. I find it very equalizing because there definitely has been historically a school of thought that chemistry exists or it doesn't. And I don't think that's true. I think people certainly inherently can have more chemistry with each other than others, but it is something that can also be taught and performed. I also really like this because showmances are a thing. Actors develop feelings for actors they're playing opposite, and there have been actors that I've worked with who have said, you know, I really like doing the chemistry exercise before each show because it was a part of stepping into the character, reminding myself that I am not so-and-so, I am myself, but this is something the character feels. So anyway, when we talk about the performance of chemistry, it really breaks down into vulnerability and synchronized movement. The idea that the actors read as comfortable together on stage, they aren't doing anything defensive, no crossed arms, no hands in pockets, no crossed legs, no, for film socialized people often beveling, right, making ourselves as small as possible, making sure that they just seem comfortable in each other's space, are able to be vulnerable. So step one is deceptively hard. I have done it so many times and I laugh every time, but I'm gonna ask the actors to simply again stand facing each other. Cool, step one, nothing guarded, we love it. All right, step two is maintaining eye contact. This can also be looking at the brow or upper cheek if direct eye contact is too uncomfortable. I also want to make sure that we're not being ableist in this and saying actors have to be stock still. If stimming or slight movement is something that helps them, that's fantastic. Something else that I recommend for this is also just a relaxed jaw, slightly open even. This is something the incredible Kate Udall taught in a Linklater workshop. Jane and I think we were partners for that, yeah. And this is something that creates a much more relaxed posture. When their mouths are shut and they have jaw tension, they look like they're going to fight, which is not the intimacy we're going for. So asking them to hold this gaze. And depending on the actors, sometimes I'll have them do this for as long as 30 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time, but in this, it really feels like it. Just becoming comfortable with that level of connection or the performance thereof. But these two are pros and they've played opposite each other like a million times. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the second phase. So when we think about synchronized movement, it's the kind of kinesthetic idea of being able to finish each other's sentences. I directed a production of the play Our Town a couple years ago, and part of it I co-directed with another teacher, and I directed Act 2, specifically, go figure, right? All the romantic stuff. And so one of the things that I really liked exploring was the scene that they had in the soda shop, where they're kind of trying to dance around confessing their feelings for each other, but they're being really awkward. And so some of the staging we explored was having the actors both face completely out, but timing it so they were lifting their imaginary glasses at the same time, showing that sense of connection before they actually have that big confession. So I'm gonna ask you to stagger your feet, does not matter which one goes to the front. And this is kind of like the Viewpoint's golden coil. You can also imagine you have a really massive yoga ball between you that you don't want to drop. And so they're going to practice just kind of giving and taking power by leaning forward, back, into the side. Without one actor specifically leading more than the other. Very good. While they're doing this, I also want to point out that this is something, it's really wonderful on its own merit. We really, really like doing it, and I've noticed it make a huge, huge difference for actors of all experience levels. But this actually is staging you might recognize from Pericles. Yeah? Deb's like, yes, I And maintaining the gaze work, which also really contributes to the sense of connection here. Awesome, that feels like a good starting point. Thank you. Thank you. That was fabulous. Yes, they are incredible. Well, that's awesome. Awesome. So the next thing we're going to do, because again, we're specifically looking at intimacy in the ISC process, since we are all ISC humans right now. And we don't have a lot of, like I said earlier, set staging. Sometimes we very specifically choreograph things. We did that in Taming of the Shrew with Ari and Jeff. But very often, like with Pericles, it is something that's more, this is the container of things that are okay. You can mix and match when they happen. And so to do that, I'm going to have them play with what we call the ingredients or components of intimacy work a little bit. So that way, as we start to work on this scene here in just a couple of minutes, they'll have some tools at the ready they're already thinking about playing with. So I'm going to cross over here now, because why not? And so one of the first things that we talked about, we did the eye contact thing, that's a huge, huge tool, but rate of movement and opening and closing of distance. So how do the actors come together or move apart from each other? Who is instigating that? When? Why? What story is being told if it happens very quickly or very slowly? So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and create as much distance as you can on this lower platform. Awesome. All right, so they're going to close distance. Someone give me a number.
7.
7, great. You're going to close distance, meet in the middle over the count of 7. It's going to be a slow 7. You do not have to step on each beat. And if you would like to incorporate arcs as well as straight lines with circles, totally fine. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. Great audience, what story did you get? Wonderful, I'll take that. What story did it look like they might have been telling? Something romantic, something tense, something aggressive, kind of tense?
Kind of tense and sexy both at the
Oh.
same time.
I'll take that. We can put that energy in Richard III. Absolutely. Cool, we'll try this again. Give me another slightly smaller but not mean number, so like not 2.
5.
Let's do 5, great. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool, how about that? How did that change?
Different.
Yeah. And they maintain that beautiful connection. Awesome. I'm gonna have them just move around the space a little bit, playing with another one of my favorite tools, which can also contribute to another thing I really love in intimacy as much as you can. The few people you have to the stage. Or just kidding, Trish. Yes, you're amazing. I really like looking at power and sequences of intimacy. Who has power? Does it stay the same way throughout the whole story? So one of the ways that I like communicating that is through more eye contact work, but specifically, when is it not happening? When is one of the actors intentionally trying to make eye contact and the other avoiding? And of course, this can be for good call, a variety of reasons, right? It could be something that is tense and uncomfortable, and maybe one actor is genuinely trying to hide from the other. It could be playful. A bajillion years ago, I was BB in a production of As You Like It, and so there was a lot of avoiding gaze, not because I was upset or angry or anything like that, but because it was fun, So, I'm not going to give them as much specificity. We're not going to do this for terribly long, maybe like 20 seconds, but just play with seeking and avoiding gaze. Who is trying to connect, who is avoiding, and what happens when you finally meet. Okay, that was adorable. I love it so much. Okay, cool. Awesome. So on the one sheet that I gave you, there are some other examples of some of the tools that we use. I'm uplifting ones that, again, specifically go into the kind of improvisational energy that we bring into the ISC process. Also because I find that a lot of the work I end up doing is, yes, choreography, but also just helping actors perform being comfortable with another human in the space. I intimacy directed a production of Fun Home at Los Alamos Light Opera, and the actors that playing the roles that traditionally do have a very, very intense sequence of intimacy were both minors, and the director really wanted to find different ways to tell that story. So it became the story of being comfortable holding hands, which is a really, really lovely thing. Certainly not under the umbrella of what we typically think of intimacy design, but I really am so interested just in the creation of connection between characters. So, now the moment we've all been waiting for, we're going to get into Richard III, which of course, as you probably know, these two played, well, half of Richard, really, and Lady Anne in a beautiful, beautiful production of the ISC. I guess I can't say last summer now, can I? No. 2 summers ago, yeah. So we're looking at their first scene together, Act 1, Scene 2. And so as an intimacy professional, what I typically do will look through the text, of course, and identify the moments of intimacy, potential intimacy, who is involved, what are the stage directions saying. Marilyn, you've seen about 1 million of these from me. So we're gonna pretend I already did it. Words are hard, I already did that. So we are pretending that we are doing text work with the actors. So if you would like, yeah, we're good on time to go ahead and just read through the part that you've been looking at. And then we will talk about it a little bit.
And again, okay, so we were looking at the whole scene, so should we, I forget if we had decided to trim it or just sort of.
With Ari's cut, I think it's pretty brief. Let's read through the whole thing, and then if it ends up being very, very long, we might just look at the parts that have stage direction.
And then just read, or do you want us to like explore while we read?
Why don't you explore while you read? Why not?
Vaunt, thou dreadful minister of hell, thou hast but power over his mortal body, his soul thou canst not have, therefore be gone.
Sweet saint, for charity be not so cursed.
Thou devil, for God's sake, hence and trouble us not. For thou hast made the happy earth thy hell, filled it with cursing cries and deep exclaims. If thou delight to view thy heinous deeds, behold this pattern of thy butcheries. Oh, gentlemen, see dead Henry's wounds, that's the word. Dead Henry's wounds open their congealed mouths and bleed afresh. Blush. Blush, thou lump of foul deformity, for 'tis thy presence that exhales this blood from cold and empty veins where no blood dwells. O God, which this blood makes, revenge his death. O earth, which this blood drinks, revenge his death.
Lady, you know no rules for charity, which renders good for bad, blessings for curses.
Villain, thou knowest nor law of God nor man, no beast so fierce but know some touch of pity.
But I know none, and therefore am no beast.
Ah, wonderful, when devils tell the truth.
More wonderful when angels are so angry. Vouchsafe divine perfection of a woman of these supposed crimes, to give me leave by circumstance, but to acquit myself.
Vouchsafe diffused infection of man, of these known evils, but to give me leave by circumstance to curse thy cursed self.
I did not kill your husband.
Why then, he's alive.
No, he is dead, and slain by Edward's hands.
In thy foul throat thou liest. Queen Margaret saw thy murderous falcon smoking in his blood, lo which thou once didst bend against her breast, but that thy brothers be beside the point.
I was provoked by her slanderous tongue that laid their guilt upon my guiltless shoulders.
Thou wast provoked by thy bloody mind that never dreamst on aught but butcheries. Didst thou not kill this king?
I grant you.
Dost grant me, hedgehog, and God grant me too, thou mayst be damned for that wicked deed. He was gentle, mild, and virtuous.
The better for the King of Heaven that hath him.
He is in heaven, where thou shalt never come.
Let him thank me then that hoped to send him thither. He was fitter for that place than earth.
Thou unfit for any place but hell.
Yes. One place else, if you will hear me name it.
Some dungeon.
Your bedchamber.
Ill rest betide the chamber where thou liest.
So will it, madam, till old. So will it, madam, till I lie with you.
I hope so.
I know so. But gentle Lady Anne, to leave this keen encounter of our wits and fall something into a slower method, is not the causer of these timely deaths as blameful as the executioner?
Thou wast the cause, and most accursed effect.
Thy beauty was the cause of that effect. Thy beauty that did haunt me in my sleep to undertake the death of all the world so that I might live 1 hour in your sweet bosom.
If I thought that, I'd tell thee, homicide, these nails should rent that beauty from my cheeks.
These eyes could not endure sweet beauty's wrack. You should not blemish it if I stood by. As all the world is cheered by the sun, so I by that. It is my day, my life.
Black night o'ershade thy day, and death thy life.
Curse not thyself, fair creature, for thou art both.
I would I were, to be revenged on thee.
'Tis a quarrel most unnatural to be revenged on him that loveth thee.
It is a quarrel just and reasonable to be revenged on him that killed my husband.
He that bereft thee, lady, of thy husband, did it to help thee to a better husband.
His better doth not breathe upon the earth.
He lives that loves thee better than he could.
Where is he?
Here.
Here's a moment where I'm going to ask for my intimacy coordinator's
I got you,
support.
yes.
And I want to beep, yes, let's go.
So I'm supposed to spit at him now.
Indeed, yes.
And there's language in the script about having been spat upon. I think for now, I feel less comfortable actually being spat on. Maybe we could do a placeholder.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. That is
Yeah.
one of the things also on that sheet. We use placeholders in theatrical and occasionally film intimacy to take the place of lip-to-lip contact before we are ready to do it, because it is so awkward, script in hand. So that is a palm-to-palm or cheek-to-cheek, depending on the needs of the scene. But for this purpose, absolutely, we do not want saliva going about in general. So I think if we mime it with the action with the head and sound upstage of Jeff, we will avoid any kind of saliva on any human.
Cool. Okay.
Sounds perfect.
Awesome, let's do it.
This is gonna be a really
Okay.
bad spit.
It's fine.
Okay.
He lives that loves thee better than he lives that loves thee better than he could.
Where is he?
Here. Why dost thou spit at me?
Would it were mortal poison for thy sake?
Never came poison from so sweet a place.
Never hung poison on a fowler toad. Not of my sight, thou dost infect mine eyes.
Thine eyes, sweet lady, hath infected mine.
Would they were basilisks to strike me dead.
I would they were, that I might die at once, for now they kill me with a living death. These eyes which never shed remorseful tear, not when thy warlike father, like a child, told the sad story of my father's death, that all the standers by had wet their cheeks, like trees bedashed with rain. In that sad time, my manly eyes did scorn an humble tear, and what these sorrows could not thence exhale, thy beauty hath, and made them blind with weeping. Teach not thy lip such scorn, lady, teach not thy lip such scorn, for it was made for kissing, lady, not for such contempt. Okay, hold, this is, there's a bit with a knife.
There is, which we don't have. That is okay. Are you comfortable acting as though you are holding
Sure,
this like that?
perfect.
Yeah.
Teach not thy lips such scorn, for it was made for kissing, lady, not for such contempt. If your revengeful heart cannot forgive, lo, here I lend thee this sharp-pointed sword, which if thou please to hide in this true breast, and let the soul forth that adoreth thee, I lay it naked to the deadly stroke, and humbly beg the death upon my knee. Nay, do not pause, for I did kill King Henry, but 'twas thy beauty that provoked me. Nay, now dispatch, 'twas I that stabbed young Edward, but 'twas thy heavenly face that set me on. Take up the sword again, or take up me.
Rise, dissembler. Though I wish thy death, I will not be the executioner.
Then bid me kill myself, and I will do it.
I have already.
That was in thy rage. Speak it again, and even with the word, this hand, which for thy love did kill thy love, shall for thy love kill a far truer love.
Would I knew thy heart.
'Tis figured in my tongue.
Fear me both are false.
Then never man was true.
Well, put up your sword.
Say then my peace is made,
That shalt thou know hereafter.
and shall I live in hope?
All men, I hope, live so.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring. Look how my ring encompasseth thy finger. Even so thy breast encloseth my poor heart. Wear both of them, for both of them are thine. Bid me farewell.
Tis more than you deserve. But since you teach me how to flatter you, imagine I have said farewell already.
And scene. Aren't they incredible?
Definitely.
Notice some of those tools in action, a lot of the opening and closing of distance. I also noticed a lot of stillness from Jeff. movement was very, very intentional. I want to uplift one thing that they were doing that we didn't really talk about, but part of this work that is so, so helpful is actors having an opportunity to say, wait, I don't know what's going on. How should we do this, right? Jeff called hold, we heard a beep. One of the theatrical intimacy ways of saying that is buttons, because other than in Taming the Shrew, which we've covered, is
Oh,
not
yeah.
typically in a Shakespearean text.
And Lear has it too, I think.
It does, but other than those two annoying exceptions, it's not typically in the text, and so it's not something someone can confuse for a cue. So I just want to uplift that they were doing something that we really, really like seeing in this work, because once they got that clarification, they would have been able to commit to the movement, because if Jane, for example, hadn't asked about the clarification for this bit, it might have just, really, you were never in awkward as me, Jane, but don't worry about that. But it might have been something that she would not have been able to commit to. So, I have an idea, but are there any moments that you would like to look at specifically choreography-wise?
So, okay, when we're rehearsing, if we were to be rehearsing this, you know, I would be saying the bit with the knife at the very end.
Yes.
There's some timing, I think,
Yeah.
but I don't know the lines well enough, so I'm okay to not really work that.
Yeah.
I actually like still just kind of organically. I feel like, and this is what's, by the way, what I love about ISC is we don't set the blocking. It's different every day. So we could do it that way one night, and another night we could do it where we're very on top of each other, and another night you might come and there's a lot more distance, and it's just what we're feeling on the day. So I sort of like just feeling it out, feeling where I'm impelled to move or close or push, pull, yield, resist.
Yeah.
Jane, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. The knife, I mean, when we did this, was like, it was a lot of like, where does this work and where does this happen and what does have to be set, because we don't want anybody to get hurt, right? So like, you know, there were times where I would like throw the knife and I'd be like, oh shit, where goes the knife? Like, how are we gonna make sure we get that back and nobody's like stepping on the knife or anything? You know, there were certain things that we did end up giving a little more attention to, and also just like comfort, right? Because it is, when you're in it, you're feeling it, and it is kind of like heavy, right, in that moment. I want to say, I do agree that like being able to just play is so helpful, because then you find things that you wouldn't find if you just had like sort of set blocking, right? Like you find different moments where you're like, oh boy, when you said that and you were looking at me this way, it totally changed the way my character was feeling in that scene, or the way I delivered the next line. But I do think like something that is, I think, the point of this entire opportunity we have together is that the work that we've done over the years and like that we do to like practice these skills and get comfortable and build that connection is what allows us to do that. Because if we hadn't done all that work and spent all that time as a company engaging in these different exercises, I don't think we would all feel the same level of freedom and comfort and safety to play that way. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yes. That is one of the things that I do really, really love about the ISC process, and how actors are able to rely on instinct. And I always hear Marty saying that from Henry IV, by the way. But anyway, yes, I know, Marty. But I think that we also have some moments that we do find that we can choreograph to tell different stories in different ways, like how we talked about with you and Ari this summer. How were you closing distance for that final kiss? What were you doing leading up to the kiss on the cheek moment, which was always so endearing? So what I'd like to look at is the ring moment.
Yeah, that's the one I was gonna say.
Oh,
That
yeah.
took us a really
Yes.
long time to get comfortable with too, as I remember.
Yeah. And so
What are we doing? Who's
Yeah.
like, how forceful is this? Like, is it accepted? Is it not accepted?
Absolutely, and so one of the things that's beautiful about this work and how it fits into the ISC model is we can play with different kinds of choreography. So if you're like, okay, so I think we're gonna be more forceful today, you might know like, okay, so I have a looser arm, right? So let's just look at that moment right there at the end. Going from, let's say, but shall I live in hope? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and so I would like to see what you have been, or what you just did, as much as you can recreate it from the audience perspective. And then we can talk through some other potential intentions and how that might be staged.
Cool. Sweet. But shall I live in hope?
All men I hope live so.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring? Look how my ring encompasseth thy finger. Even so thy breast encloseth my poor heart. Wear both of them, for both of them are thine. Bid me farewell.
'Tis more than you deserve. But since you teach me how to flatter you, imagine I have said farewell already.
Yes!
Cool, beautiful, beautiful. So what happens, keeping the same intention, but playing with that beautiful connection that you had earlier, how would you feel about trying, Jeff, maybe your hand starting a little bit higher at a light level of touch on
Yeah.
Jane's arm and then sliding down?
Yes.
You wanna try it? Jane, how does that sound to you?
So keeping the intention is light and not forceful, but just
A little bit of that possessive.
seductive, possessive.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
But shall I live in hope?
All men I hope live so.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring. Look at how this ring encompasseth thy finger. Even so thy breast encloseth my poor heart. Wear both of them, for both of them are thine. Bid me farewell.
'Tis more than you deserve. But since you teach me how to flatter you, imagine I have said farewell already.
Nice.
Wow.
So how does that change the storytelling?
Oh my God.
Right. But also, I really like asking actors to give adjectives or supporting those conversations because you did a springboard off of what I was kind of saying, and you took that as agency to then close distance more, play more of it behind Jane, which created a completely different element to the story, which was really cool.
The interesting thing is I almost stopped the scene and said, I don't like what I just did. I'm gonna go back. I'm like, no, let's see what else we find. And yeah. Who was it who made a sound? Was that you? Yeah. So what was your experience?
Whoa, okay.
Just-
Bite took right out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's space, and that's, what is that, Zoe? What is it that we did that caused that feeling? Storytelling.
It was the sense of connection. It was
Oh,
you were
yeah.
there in it, there was consent, there was trust. I will say, I think the thing that was bothering you was you were kind of reaching,
Yeah.
and I think if you had been a step in,
Thank
that
you.
would have felt much more natural.
I didn't feel like I felt like I was touching her arm because I was told to touch her arm, not
Exactly.
the character wanting to.
And so being able to find and then negotiate, say, okay, that was maybe it, how can we revisit, how can we amp this up, how can we change it a little bit? So, now let's play with a different intention. What are we gonna do? How else would you see a scene going for these characters?
I would love to try something, but it asks you to do it a certain way.
Okay.
How do you feel about like not wanting it on your finger?
Yeah.
Let's try to see what that looks like. I don't know what that does to me or whatever, but.
I'm at it. Let's
Yeah,
find out.
yeah.
Alright, so just a safety thing, Jane, of course, as it sounds like Jeff may be grabbing you at some point, lose her arm is definitely gonna be better. Jeff, you're a combat person, you know, safe grabs,
Yes.
you know.
Safeguards.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I'll just say, sorry, no, let's just play it.
I mean, you're absolutely, and always button, hold,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, we can play it then.
Yeah.
And I want to look at something. Can we go back one line before that, just because
Yeah.
The never man was true. Okay, just figured in my tongue. How about I would I knew your heart?
Okay. And yeah, so you're still not threatening. Okay. Would I knew thy heart?
Tis figured in my tongue.
I fear me both are false.
The never man was true.
Well, put up your sword.
Say then my peace is made.
That shalt thou know hereafter.
But shall I live in hope?
All men I hope live so.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring. Now my ring encompasseth, what's the word? Encompasseth thy finger, even so thy breast encloseth my poor heart. Wear both of them, for both of them are thine. Bid me farewell.
'Tis more than you deserve. But since you teach me how to flatter you, imagine I have said farewell already.
Alright, so what do we see there? Definitely different storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is we have to get married, so I guess maybe you come back and convince me later.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't totally work to play it that way, but.
And I don't know if it's really in the text. I think there's
Yeah.
there's elements of that assertiveness, but
Yeah, I
it didn't
think,
feel quite right.
no, it didn't. But that's what I've always struggled with about the ending of that scene. It's just like, yeah, I don't.
Say more, because this is huge.
Yeah, go. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Literally.
I mean, we went back and forth about this a million times, right? And I still go back and forth about this when I see this text and play with it. I think there has to be, that's why I'm not even sure, like, I don't think what I did worked, and I'm not sure that the forcing thing works either.
Yeah.
Because there has to be this, they have to, like, make a truce by the end of the scene. They have to make it, you know, she has to ultimately be seduced, be wooed, be convinced. And so, yeah, and I think, like, and the way everything that leads up to it happens has to also get them to that place. But I think ultimately, right, like, she is gonna marry him. She is gonna hope for the best. And so what, like, how do we tell that story in a convincing way? Because it always seems really hard to me to make that convincing after, like, you killed my husband, you killed my father-in-law, like, you're a renowned asshole throughout the land, like, why am I gonna marry you, you know? And so it's, like, that was always a hard thing to play with, and so, but we did a lot of work around these characters, like, autobiographies and their previous connection, and, like, and how do we bring that to life throughout the course of the scene? Like, they know each other extremely well, and, like, and how do we make that, that repartee, that, like, witty exchange, part of the, like, what ultimately brings her along and, like, brings her together, where she's like, okay, yes, fine, I get it, all right, I'm convinced. I mean, I think there's a lot of other vulnerabilities in her character that we don't have to get into right now, that put her in a place where she's more open to that. But I do think ultimately, like, we played this a lot too, like, I'm angry and sad and, you know, the heavens are crashing down on us, and you really play so sweetly and so seductively the whole, like, all of the text supports this very, like, loving, you know, wooing kind of behavior. So I think, sorry, that was a big long monologue, I didn't mean to deliver all that. But I think that ultimately, like, Anne has to get to a place where she's truly convinced and is like, okay, yeah, I give in. Fine, I believe you. You love me. I want to be loved. I don't want to be alone. I need this. I need this closeness and this affection and safety, you know, given everything I just have been through. So, but that's, like, what playing with these things helps us find out.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you, like, what made it feel wrong to, like, not wrong, but, like, what made it feel like it didn't work? That last.
Yeah, it just, textually, I just think she's coming around to him by the end.
Yeah.
And if done that way, it doesn't seem like that's what I just saw happen.
Yeah, and Shakespeare has not written another scene where it's, okay, just kidding, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
So we only have this scene.
Right.
So what I'm thinking, though, because I felt like there was some really interesting, that resistance, right? That push and resist kind of energy that we had here. I feel like if we were working this for real, there would be places to explore perhaps attempted contact earlier in
Yes.
the scene, and that's where it comes in.
Yes.
Cool.
Makes sense.
Awesome. So they just did a beautiful job. Please give them a round of applause. And though we are not doing the entire show, closure practice is a wonderful thing. Again, we really encourage actors. We don't encourage method acting in the ISC or anywhere else. So being able to leave the character in the space, is very, very helpful for actors, particularly working on heavy stuff, but also sometimes light stuff too, you know? So there are a few different ways that we can do this. I really like a couple kind of more kinesthetic ones. This one was from Ann James, who is the founder of Intimacy Coordinators of Color, and it's simply snapping next to your ear. You want to try it? Yeah. And so this is secondhand information through Antonio Menino, who's an incredible intimacy professional in this town as well. But basically, it's kind of, even though you physiologically know you're doing this, your brain doesn't quite expect the sound. And so it kind of causes, oh yeah, I'm here, kind of reset, which is really, really helpful. That's great for actors in the middle of, if you're in the middle of a show, you have a really hard scene, you're coming on as a different character, and you won't have time to fully process, you can just kind of do that. The very first show that I did in Santa Fe was a production of Much Ado About Nothing, where I played both hero and a member of the Princess Watch. And if you're familiar with that show, for one, Act 4 Scene 1 is not a good time for hero, to say the least. She is scorned and nearly murdered at her own wedding. And then the Princess Watch comes in the next scene, and is hilarious and hysterical and ridiculous and slapsticky. And so I had the time to change the costume and then go back on after I was weeping and sobbing and all this other stuff. This was in 2017. I didn't have this tool at that time. I wish that I had. It would have been so, so helpful to me. So I really love this. Another one that I really like is from the Alba emoting technique, which is all about the performance of emotion, but not letting it emotionally damage you. This is called stepping out. And all the emoting technique was developed by a neuroscientist, so it's really, really cool how it engages neurologically. Again, something that people much smarter than me can explain better. I just know it works. So I'm going to ask the actors to join me. If you want to stand and join, you can as well. It's also just really great if you're kind of stressed. So we lace our hands in front of us, and slowly, as is comfortable, bring our hands up, engaging to the shoulders, and breathe, always breathe. And back down slowly. And we do this, 2 or 3 times. We'll do one more. And then the next piece of this is making skin or muscle level contact, either rubbing or tapping, whatever's more comfortable for the actor, starting at the top of the head, working the way down. Obviously skipping anything that's activating, triggering, or uncomfortable, because we don't want to make things worse, we want to make them better. And this is just another way for actors to really come back into their bodies and engage with what is actually happening to them and the space they are in. The last piece is just kind of shaking it out, very somatic. And I do like doing somatic exercises, the idea of imaginary throwing of things. That's also really helpful for actors too. So that's our presentation. We now have time for Q&A. All right, and any questions you have about intimacy work, about Shakespeare and intimacy, about the ISC? Christine.
Okay, so different than film.
Yes.
What happens when consent changes within the run of a show?
Yeah.
That is something that thankfully I haven't encountered too many times, but I have seen some injuries happen. One of the actors that we often work with has an autoimmune condition where sometimes levels of touch have to change completely. And so typically I'm not at the level of people who are jet setting from New York to LA to whatever to the next gig, right? Though those people would have an intimacy captain or an associate who would be able to handle it. But typically what will happen then is I will come back in for a pickup rehearsal, usually a closed one, and then we can talk about, okay, so what happened? They don't have to give their specifics, like what are the needs? What are the needs that have to be met that aren't currently being met by this staging? And then revisiting and reviewing and just saying, okay, great, so here's our new staging, get the new notes to the stage manager. And it's something that I try very, very hard to be super neutral about because there is so much toxicity and shame around this work often in general. So that's typically how I would approach it in the best case scenario.
And who's in a closed rehearsal in theater?
So typically in Santa Fe closed rehearsals, it would be myself, the director, the stage manager, and the actors. If I have an assistant, which I have a few people that I've worked with who've been amazing in that capacity, they might be in the room as well. And understudies sometimes, although I really tend to prefer, like we did with Spring Awakening, to have completely separate understudy rehearsals, because something that even with the needs of Spring Awakening, it was very, very intense from an intimacy perspective, the actors' boundaries were not going to be the same. And so not saying, okay, great, so Jensen and Emmy? What was her name? Jensen was Melchior understudy. Understudy Melchior and Vendla are not going to have the same boundaries as main cast Melchior and Vendla. And so not saying, okay, you have to do the exact same choreography, also because that can be very ableist, right, from the movement concerns. So, yeah, yes?
How do the director and the intimacy director work together?
I have some people who can speak to this in this room. It kind of depends on the process. With something like the ISC, it's something very much where Ari and I will say, hey, I see a potential moment of intimacy here. Or she might say, hey, the actors are discovering this there. Can you come in and look at this? And there's a real, it's dangerous to say, but it is true in the ISC, it's very lateral. It's not a hierarchical process. Ari is very much part of the company. She prefers the term facilitator rather than director. So it's not something where I'm, getting her to sign off my choreography or anything like that. And so then we will have a small closed rehearsal like Ari and Jeff and I did for Taming of the Shrew. Noah and Riley and I had for also Shrew. And we will just kind of like work through that and then, hey Ari, you want to come take a look at this or facilitate or whatever. We did the same thing for Pericles. So that's typically how that works for the ISC. When I'm working in a more traditional process, something that Marilyn and I found worked really well was having a phone call before and just saying, hey, this scene's gonna happen. What are you as a director looking for? How can I communicate that to the actors and do that in a way that everyone feels safe and happy? Making sure Marilyn's vision's honored, but making sure the actors' boundaries are honored as well. Yes, Jen.
I love the concept of reciprocal gaze, and I can see from tonight how the quality of the eye contact can just make or break the relationship or the scene. How do you teach that?
Ooh.
What you saw.
Well, suppose Jeff is way too aggressive to you. Do you call wait, or how does that work when maybe you're gazing really too aggressively or not enough at all?
To the point where it's making the actress uncomfortable, or to the point where it's ruining the storytelling of the scene?
All of that.
So if it's making anyone uncomfortable, beep, we pause. Something's off, I don't feel right. Like we all know in our process that we can stop and say there's something I feel unsafe by or unsettled by or I want to address. And then if it's just that, well, she's fine or I'm fine, but it's ruining the story, a facilitator or outside eyes or a director, hopefully, will say, the story I was getting was that you were overpowering her actually, and I want to see a little more of a back and forth, so next time through, let's play with them. So we'll get outside eyes, feedback, directing, planting a seed for us to try a different approach.
And one of the things about being an intimacy professional is that really what we are in a lot of ways is body language experts, and so that might be a situation where if an outside eye said, hey, Zoe, look at the scene, what do you think? And they'd be like, oh, they need to do this, right? So I'd be able to give some suggestions for feedback or how to modify that. I love that you brought up the outside eye though, because that's been a really helpful part of our process.
Yeah, other actors will speak up too. Just
Yeah.
say, when I saw that earlier today, I really felt this, but when you guys just did it just now, it felt this other way. I wonder if you might try, and then offer a suggestion.
I mean, we saw that, particularly with what you were doing, Jeff. I just wondered how you guys managed it on stage, when it's either good or not the way it should be.
And then also sometimes it's, hey, look, my line is stop yelling at me, and you're not really yelling at me to the point where I feel like I would say stop yelling at me, so I need you please to yell at me a little harder. So we can ask for, needs to be met that way too.
Or like at the end of that Richard scene, right? Like we had scripts in hand, so not exactly, right? Not making the same level of eye contact you normally would on stage, but if I'm looking away the entire time, right? We're never gonna get to that place of connection until I finally relent and turn around and look at him, and so.
That's what happened.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that we play with and find, and sometimes you feel it, and sometimes other people will either note it, but they didn't see it or didn't feel it, or that they did, and so, yeah, it's definitely a cooperative process in that way. Yes.
Of course, we all know all life's a stage. As a lifelong teacher, I'm thinking, how, this is really valuable in all human interactions. And as schools are starting to realize they've got to teach consent, and so, I'm wondering if you or other is this filtering into a broader arena than just the theater?
Well, I mean, I am a teacher, so in my
I know you are.
classroom, yes. It is something I'm very mindful of with my students, how I can communicate that at a developmentally appropriate level. I've also been brought in, though, to NMSA to, I mean, yes, work with students on specific scenes, but also just generally, theater kids are very touchy-feely. And so really teaching the NMSA kids how to understand boundaries and the establishment thereof, and not to assume touch is always okay. But Jan and I actually just had a conversation on the phone 2 days ago about something very similar to this, which was a conversation at church, right? About how intimate to be with new people. You know, how much proximity, how much can you connect with them, how much should you leave them alone? So I think that this is something that, even as there are always going to be people who still roll their eyes and whatever, I do think the concept of consent and boundaries and just personal autonomy and agency, I think that's something that this field kind of has broader reaching. And I also want to uplift, one of the things that's really, really cool about the training that you spoke about is I was able, during the pandemic, to take some classes from Lizzie Talbot, who is the intimacy coordinator for Bridgerton, which is pretty cool. And something that I've really noticed as that show has taken off is more and more people are talking about intimacy coordinators and intimacy work and noticing it. And I think the more people are aware that it's not just an all or nothing kind of thing around personal touch and contact and proximity and this, that, the other, I think the more society as a whole is going to be comfortable with the idea of essentially consent-based practice.
Thank you. Think we're.
Oh, Jennifer's got one.
One more question, okay.
You threw out the word ableist, which is not a word I'm familiar with.
Oh, yeah. So we just want to make sure that the work we do in theater is accessible for people of any sort who have any kind of being differently able or disabled or what have you. So what I was speaking to specifically is actors who are neurodiverse. Some of the things that we ask them to do in a rehearsal space can be really, really challenging. So when I refer to stimming, an actor who is neurodiverse might want to move their hands more, might want to tap, might want to shift or move their weight a little bit. And in traditional acting practice, they might get yelled at. No, you're supposed to be perfectly still, and whatever. So it's the idea that with neurodiverse actors, as long as they're meeting the expectations of what we're actually trying to do, which was eye contact, then it's okay if they're fidgeting a little bit, if they're moving a little bit. And the same thing goes with making sure that intimacy staging, if you have an actor who has a disability. Knees are something I'm perpetually concerned about with all of the actors I work with at all times, you know? So it's ableist to assume that an actor can drop to their knees without knee pads, you know? Maybe they have knee issues, maybe they just don't want to have knee issues, but regardless, we're wanting to make sure that we are not exacerbating disabilities or excluding actors who may have disabilities.
Awesome. This was so useful, functional, enjoyable. It was really amazing. Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
You are. Thank you.
I wanted to let you know we have a couple things coming up. Those of you that may not follow TLC, this week we are doing a Steps Out, which is our theater performance project. Heroes of the Fourth Turning at Actors Lab. It's Thursday night. You get a ticket discount and a talkback. You can still sign up for that. On November 14th, we're going to do a Steps Out for Eden Prairie, 1971, again at the lab. November 23rd, Triumph is doing. We have a ticket discount and a talkback for that day. More events on the TSF website. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.